What's up, guys? Welcome back to another episode of Missflips. In today's episode, we are going to be flipping this little baby while showing you guys exactly how to get started furniture flipping. So if you're a beginner and just starting out, this video is for you. Alright, so let's get flipping. So the first thing you're going to need to do is find a piece. This can be done in many ways, but the main two that I use are thrift stores and Facebook Marketplace. Facebook is a great way to find awesome pieces for a really good price. I know thrift stores right now are kind of undependable when it comes to that affordable bargain that we're looking for, so that's why Facebook Marketplace is a great bet to find something awesome. But if you're looking for just something easy that there's no pressure on doing, or if you're looking to revamp a space in your own home, starting off with your own furniture is a great way to start. This piece was in my living room, but we decided to change it for this piece right here, which if you haven't seen this video yet, make sure to put it on the queue. But I'm going to show you guys just a really simple, easy way to get a fresh new look on the furniture you already have. So now that we've covered the topic on how to find a piece to flip, let's cover what we need to actually flip it.
So to get started, there are a couple of things that I consider must-haves for beginner furniture flippers, and that is sandpaper, a good quality paint, paint applicators, a screwdriver, and tape. However, there are two things that I did leave out, which is wood filler and top coat, two very important things. Here are some other items that I will be using during the flip, but they are not necessary to be able to flip furniture. But hey, why stop there, right? Let's add some more things to that list with some items that you're probably going to want to invest in as your business grows and as your skill set develops. But let's get back to basics. And I can't believe I forgot the most important thing on this list, a respirator. Every flipper should have a respirator.
While looking for a piece to flip, you want to check it out and make sure that the repairs that need to be done to it are not outside of your wheelhouse or are something that you are comfortable learning how to do. You want to inspect your piece top to bottom and check every nook and cranny to make sure that those repairs are doable for you. So before we get started painting this piece, we're going to make sure that it's super clean so the paint has something to adhere to. If you don't clean your piece beforehand, your paint is going to be sticking to all that dirt and grime and residue that was left before the piece was painted, and it's going to just flake off over time. So before we get cleaning, we're going to remove any hardware that's left on the piece. Some hardware may require a more difficult remover, but typically for most hardware, you can unfasten it by just removing the screws on the inside of the door or drawer.
I highly recommend getting one of these screwdrivers that has multiple heads that you can just alternate depending on which one you need. So for this, I would be typically going for a Phillips head screwdriver, but I don't have the one that I need for this specific one, so I'm opting for a flathead. Since I don't have the other three of these missing bits, I decided to remove the last one and just fill in the holes with wood filler. Once everything was removed, it was time to get to cleaning.
So for cleaning, you can use anything from a degreaser to a household cleaner, but if you do use either of those, I highly recommend rinsing off the product afterwards with water. I personally like to use a very scientific concoction of water and vinegar. It's the best way that I have found that cleans furniture while also sanitizing it. And not to mention, it is super eco-friendly, which who doesn't want that?
See, this is the stuff that we don't want our paint sticking to. While cleaning your piece, this is a great opportunity to make note of any repairs that need to be made or crevices that need to be filled or anything like that, so that once it is clean, you can get started on those repairs. Once everything is all clean, you can get started on those minor repairs.
Now for these repairs, I'm gonna make sure that it's pulled all the way out so that I can make sure that the glue is getting into the places that it needs to be.
So before you make your repair, you want to make sure that the zone is free of any of the old glue that was left prior or anything that might stop the two pieces of wood from sticking together. Once the zone is clear, it's time to go in with some wood glue. I personally use Gorilla wood glue, and then I always like to have a paper towel handy for any of the drips or spillage that might come out when you push the pieces together. To ensure that the wood glue gets to where it needs to go, I am using a glue syringe, and I'm just putting the glue right into there, and this, I cannot stress the usefulness of these. If you're beginning furniture flipping, this will make it a whole lot easier to make all of those repairs. By the way, if you're interested in any of the products that I use in my videos, make sure to check out the description because I will have all the links to all the products that I use down below. Something that I learned quite recently in my furniture journey is that sometimes things have to be broken all the way so that they can be fixed right. So as long as you know that you can repair it afterwards, don't be afraid to break off a piece of veneer or to break a piece of wood completely if it is already breaking, and that way there will be no question that all the glue is where it needs to be. To get everything into place, I used my mallet and then used my clamps to push it the rest of the way. You want to make sure to clean up the excess glue sooner than later, that way you won't have to work with the glue later when you go to sand. I let these repairs dry for the recommended dry time on the bottle, and then I removed the clamps, and then it was time to start prepping for paint. Before starting prep, I made sure to apply my safety gear, which in this case is just my respirator, which will protect me from any of the dust that's kicked up in the air from scuff sanding the piece. For scuff sanding, I'm using this 240 grit sandpaper, and I'm just wanting to get rid of the shine that is left by the finish. This makes sure that the paint has something to adhere to, whereas if you're just putting it right on top of the piece, the top coat will prevent the paint from really adhering to it. So if you notice, this is before and this is after it's sanded. Notice how the shine is completely gone from the sanded part. This process is definitely expedited with an electric sander, so I do recommend getting one eventually. However, for those of you who don't have an electric sander yet, I just wanted to show you guys that it is definitely doable without one. Now that we're in the longest and probably the most challenging part of flipping, I wanted to remind you guys to keep track of the hours that you spend while flipping furniture, because this will help you calculate exactly how much to charge when you're selling your pieces. Once you're finished scuff sanding, you want to go in and clean off all of the remaining dust. I personally like to go in with a vacuum first and then wipe the whole thing down with a rag. So while I was sanding, I decided to get a little bit more complicated with it and go with a washed effect on this top portion right here, which if you don't know what a wash is, it's when you mix water and paint and come up with something that's more like a stain rather than the paint, so that way you can see the wood grain underneath. To get this effect, I have to remove all of the old finish, and I'm doing that by going in with a 180 grit and then moving up to a 220 grit sandpaper. If you are a beginner furniture flipper, just note that this step is absolutely not necessary and you can skip it if you would like, but it is super fun, so if you want to give it a try, I totally think you should. So once again, I had to clean the entire piece and make sure that it was completely free of dust. Otherwise, this is what your paint would be sticking to. So for the painting process, I am starting off with the wash, and to make that, I'm using some of Good Bones paint in the color Frond, and I absolutely love this paint. It is so delicious and goes on so nicely. And to make the wash, we're gonna put a little bit of paint in there. We're not gonna use too much, so I'm just applying a little tiny bit, and then we're gonna go in there with some water. Now the measurement to this isn't exact for me. I put a different amount of water every time, I'm pretty sure, but just keep in mind the more water you put into it, the more translucent it's gonna be, and vice versa. So if you want a really translucent look like what I'm going for, I'm gonna want it to be a little bit more runny than your average wash. Make sure you stir the paint until the water and paint are no longer separated. To apply the wash, you're going to need a brush and an old rag. When I'm applying wash, I personally like to work in smaller sections. That way I can control how thick the wash is and immediately wipe it away to get that translucent effect. Think of the wash as more of a tint than it is a paint. Whenever I make a custom mix, I make sure to put it in a container that I can put a lid on. That way I can save it for later and nothing goes to waste. One of the reasons that I love Good Bones paint is because it's chalk based, which means that it doesn't need a primer. Which for beginners, the more steps that you can cut out, the better, because it means more profit for you and less time spent working. If you're interested in trying Good Bones paint, they have an awesome selection of colors, and I have a discount code for 15% off, so make sure to use that and go click on the link in the description below to try them out. When painting a piece of furniture, I always like to use a roller instead of a paintbrush because 1, it doesn't leave any paint strokes, and 2, it is way faster. Once this coat dries, I will, however, need to go back in with a paintbrush to get all of those little corners that the roller couldn't reach. To get these edges near the wash, you can either wait until the wash completely dries and apply tape so you don't paint over it, or you can just leave a gap and go in there with a fine paintbrush later to get those edges. To get this trim, you can also go very close to the edge by doing very quick motions back and forth with your roller. If you do this method, you want to make sure that you are using an almost dry roller. That way it doesn't squeeze out any of the paint and it doesn't get onto the part that you don't want it to get on. Once your coat is dry, it's pretty customary to go in with some sandpaper and just to smooth out any of the imperfections left behind with a brush. And once you clear off all the dust, it's time to go in for that second coat. For Good Bones paint, I rarely need more than 2 coats, but you always want to make sure to use the recommended amount of coats that is on your paint container, or do it until you see no more wood underneath your strokes. For my top coat, I am going in with a water-based polyurethane in a satin finish. I love satin finishes for painted furniture just because I don't like my paint to be really high and glossy. I usually only use a gloss when I am doing a wood finish, but that's all personal preference, so go with whatever you feel is good for your piece. For the inside of the doors, this is a completely unnecessary step, but if you wanted to add a little bit of an accent for the inside doors, make sure to go in there with some polyurethane and just brush it on there, and then get some tissue paper with a nice pattern that matches your paint, and just stick it right on there. You want to make sure that you have a heavy enough coat of polyurethane that your paper is just going to stick right on there, and you want to make sure that the entire surface of the part that you're trying to cover is entirely saturated with the polyurethane before you go and stick your paper on. And once you apply the paper, then you can go on top of it with another coat of the polyurethane, and you can use the exact same polyurethane that you are using to cover the rest of your piece. Just again, make sure that the entire piece of paper is fully saturated with the polyurethane. And then once everything's dry, you can go in there with a sanding block or with a piece of paper wrapped around an old credit card or even around your fingers, and just go and sand away the edges of the paper. That way you can get nice clean edges and there's no rips or tears from trying to cut it with a knife or scissors. So after everything was painted and dried, I went in and took the tape off, and I decided that the woven fabric was just a little too orange for me, so I decided to go in there with the same paint wash that I made before for the wood, and just gave it a little bit of a hazy look to match the wood of the top part of the coffee table. And again, this step is completely unnecessary, but if you want to add a nice golden touch, just take some golden metallic spray paint and spray down your hardware or any pieces that you want to be painted gold. I thought gold was going to go really well with this piece, so I decided to opt for that choice. When you're ready to apply your hardware, just poke your hardware screws through the paper and it should be good to go. You shouldn't have to tear through or damage any part of the piece or the paper in order to get that done, and then just screw in your hardware. For cleaning the glass, I'm going in again with water and vinegar and just rubbing it on with some newspaper and then using a dry piece of newspaper to wipe it all off. And now that everything's done, it is time to get everything ready for our listing. Now, if you aren't selling your piece, just go ahead and skip this step. But if you are, I highly recommend selling on Facebook Marketplace. It is such an accessible and user-friendly way to get your pieces out there to people in your area. To have a better shot at getting your desired asking price, you always want to have good photos, and you always want to make sure to show every part of the piece, including the damaged areas. For a full tutorial on how to stage and light your pieces to sell, make sure to check out my video on that topic specifically before you go in and take the photos of your piece. So while good photos are really helpful for selling, one other thing is the dimensions of your piece. You're always going to want to include those in your listing. That way it's super convenient for your buyers. So make sure to get the length, width, and height of your piece. When creating a listing, I always like to use descriptive words that help paint a picture for the buyer and encourage them to imagine what the piece would look like in their space. Also, of course, don't forget your dimensions, and make sure to mention that this is a used piece and include all of the photos of the damaged areas in your listing. But anyways, we are coming to a close here, guys. I am so thankful for each and every one of you for watching this video, and I hope that this has encouraged you to go forth and flip your own pieces of furniture. You guys are awesome, and you guys are capable of anything. If you can and haven't already, please make sure to like and subscribe and do all those things so that we can stay a happy flippin' family. And make sure to share this video with anyone you know who is looking to start flipping furniture. And until next time, guys, stay flippin'.